If I could ask you to take your seats, please. Discussing. I'm fine. I'll try. Yeah, I'll try not to take the banner as we speak. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you. Whoever tinkled the glass, thank you. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jane Gilbert. I'm the president of the Carleton University Alumni Association, and it is delightful to see you all here with us today. This is indeed a tremendous tradition, the leadership luncheons. On behalf of more than 110,000 Carleton graduates worldwide, I think it's closer to 114,000 now, and we've got about 3,000 more coming next week. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Spring 2010 Ottawa Leadership Luncheon. You know, what's the old saying, to everything there is a season? Well, universities have a life cycle, an annual life cycle, and we're just entering into probably one of the most wonderful times in the university's year, and that is heading into graduation, which spring graduation convocation begins next week. So I'd like to think of this a little bit as a kickoff to that wonderful celebration as we get a chance to join here today, remember our days at Carleton, and celebrate our guest speaker and her accomplishments today. For those of you who are attending your very first leadership luncheon, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about these events and what they're designed to achieve. The luncheons are a series of noon-hour events for all graduates in the Ottawa area. We launched the Leadership Luncheon series back in 2003, and these events give graduates a chance to meet with each other, to network, to hear from some very interesting and dynamic speakers. Now, some of our guests have been part of the Carleton community, such as proud graduate, the Honourable John Manley, and former Chancellor and Canadian astronaut Marc Garneau. Other speakers have been distinguished members of the national community, such as this past fall's guest, Dr. Mr. Thomas Taquino, past head of the Council of Chief Executives, who, interestingly enough, has since become a visiting professor at Carleton University. Perhaps that all started here. Today's speaker is an exceptional graduate of Carleton and winner of the 2009 A.D. Dunton Alumni Award of Distinction, Ms. Shona Brown. We are very interested in hearing the presentation from Dr. Brown today and to hear about her life at Carleton and about her life at Google. A business that is so ubiquitous, it's now a verb, right? Come on, hands up. How many of you Googled yourselves? Okay, you don't have to fess up, but I'm sure you all have at one point or another. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We're all delighted to be here to hear Shona speak. Today's event is the most successful leadership luncheon in our history. We have about 250 guests in attendance. So I think the wheels of business and government in this city are grinding just a little slower this afternoon because we have a lot of community leaders here with us. So why don't you give yourselves a round of applause for coming out. It's great to see you. And we also want to thank Shona for joining us and for accepting our invitation. Before we continue, I'd like to thank our title sponsor, TD Insurance Meloche Monix, for their continued support of the Carleton University Alumni Association, and also our media sponsor, the Ottawa Business Journal. And welcome to Michael Curran, who is publisher of the OBJ. Michael, are you in the audience? There we go. Wave hi. Michael Curran from the OBJ. Thank you. I'd also like to recognize a few special guests who've joined us today, and if I could ask them just to rise to be recognized, and we'll hold our applause until everyone has been introduced. Dr. Shana Brown and her parents, Dr. Richard Brown, Professor Emeritus, and Marilyn Brown. Also at the same... There we go. All right, you can applaud in between. That's okay. That's okay. Dr. David Call, Professor Emeritus and Nominator, and his wife, Mar Call. As well, we have David and Colleen McFarland, distinguished guests of Shona Brown. There we go. From the Carleton University Board of Governors, Anthony Tattersfield. Anthony. Goldie Hyder. Goldie. There we go. Jean Tarron. Jean. There we go. Vivian Hudson. And Bob Tippins. Special welcome today to Don Yeoman, longtime Board of Governors member and a Founders Award recipient. Don? Ruth Lifeso, who's a member of the Senate and a former recipient of the A.D. Dunton Alumni Award of Distinction. Ruth, I saw you over there. Yeah. Greet Hale, Chairman Emeritus, Morrison Lamott Incorporated, and honorary degree recipient. Greet, you here? And finally, some members of Carleton's senior administration, including Duncan Watt, Vice President, Finance and Administration, Dr. Peter Ricketts, Provo and Vice President, Academic, and Dr. Kim Matheson, Vice President, Research and International. Here's our members of the administration. And finally, members of our Alumni Association executive. Jay Nordenstrom, are you here? Jay's our vice president. Jay made it today. And Roseanne Howes, who is the National Capital Chapter president. Roseanne, I know you're here. Thank you all. Now, a few words about the program, the rules of engagement for this afternoon. The keynote address will take place right after lunch. Dr. Brown has agreed to answer a few questions, so please, during the address, think hard about those questions and have the questions ready as soon as she's finished speaking, and we'll point you to microphones at that point. But before we continue with lunch, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Roseanne O'Reilly Runta, and she is going to say a few words on behalf of our alma mater.
Thank you so much. You do such a wonderful job. We ought to give her a round of applause. Jane spoils us by flying from Toronto and chairing so many events with always elegance and grace. You know, she mentioned the word Google as a verb, and I was thinking about it. There are very few companies whose names have become a word in the English language. I thought of Kleenex. And, you know, it's a noun, and it's static, and it stays put, whereas Google is a verb, and it's moving. And I think that it's absolutely terrific that a vice president of Google just happens to be a Carleton graduate, because Carleton is the kind of university that educates people who are change agents, who are innovative, and we are really proud of Dr. Brown. You know, we're known by the company we keep, and a university is known by its graduates. You have given us a great deal by being a Carleton graduate and by distinguishing yourself. A university is proud to be a leader in science and technology, a leader in computer gaming. My goodness, our computing program has grown 7 times faster than any other program in North America recently. Our computing scientists, especially those in computer gaming, are quoted twice as often as those at MIT, which they are very pleased about, and so are we. We have really exciting students and classes and faculty right here. But a university is not just about science. A university is about a community. And when Dr. Brown wrote about the strategy of structured chaos, I think she was actually thinking of a faculty meeting. Not necessarily. Our faculty meetings are just lovely, but it must be some other university. And she grew up at Carleton University, you know, and when I asked her what one of her fondest memories was, she recalled skating down the tunnels on a skateboard. And she said to me she was sure that didn't happen nowadays, but I can tell you that Friday nights, if you're coming home after 5 o'clock, the tunnels do have a certain number of skateboarders out there in your memory doing it. University is a community, a very special place where people grow up as students and learn to distinguish themselves and do wonderful things for the world. There's also a place where there are teachers, wonderful teachers like Dr. Cull, who comes back and honors us with his wisdom and his enthusiasm and helping keep our community together. We really appreciate it. And Dr. Brown, whom I just have met, I've recruited him for the Emeritus Professors Association, and we hope to see him at future meetings. He has been a distinguished research professor at the university, accepting a graduate student in 2001 after he retired, and shepherding that student to a degree just last year. We thank you very much for that commitment. But a university is also about staff who have to be role models and learn as they go on. And I think that the fact that a lot of our staff at the university are enrolled in classes, are doing degrees, encourages our students, because then they sympathize with them and they say, yes, exams are hard, I'm taking them too. And it just so happens that Marilyn Brown, a former staff member for many years at the university, was also a student at the university. and she studied for many years. And we would like to recognize her long-standing service to the university and be thankful to you for your commitment to the university and offer you honorary membership in the Carleton University Alumni Association. Would you like to come forward? This was a surprise. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And since she studied French at Carleton, we will also give you one in French if you desire. Thank you very much, and I hope you all enjoy your lunch in anticipation of a wonderful speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Runta. And now, lunch is served. Enjoy your lunch. We'll be right back afterwards with our keynote speech. Thank you. Tinkling the glass here, so we're supposed to call you all to attention. Thank you. Well, hello again. I hope you've enjoyed your lunch. Dessert is coming, but we're going to move ahead with our keynote address while you're enjoying dessert and coffee. The Carleton University Alumni Association undertakes a wide number of programs and activities to engage graduates worldwide. And a vital part of our activities, of our efforts, includes the A.D. Dunton Alumni Award of Distinction. Now, this prestigious award is important because it tells other graduates about the success stories within the Carleton family. The award is presented to a graduate who has realized an outstanding achievement or contribution in any field of endeavor. It's named in honor of Carleton's fourth president, Arnold Davidson Dunton, a man who distinguished himself throughout his career as a journalist, an educator, and a member of the Canadian Public Service. Each year, we review our nominees, and we determine whose accomplishments most honor Dr. Dunton's legacy. We look for strength of character, resolve, and a commitment to excellence. Now, the award is presented annually, we say, but it's only presented when merited. There's a very long list of Carleton graduates who have outstanding achievements on their resumes, and as I say, it's important that we celebrate when we can. We have a share in their successes and the successes of our fellow graduates, I suppose because we shared in the student experience together. And as they celebrate, we celebrate the connection, that Carleton connection that we all share. So today, we honor one of our great success stories. To get things started, I would call upon the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and Design at Carleton. Dr. Rafiq Gubran is not only an admirer of Shana Brown's accomplishments, but he has a personal connection to her from her time at Carleton, and he's here today to share some of his memories of that connection. Dr. Gubran?
Thank you, Jane. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to help present the distinguished A.D. Dunton Alumni Award of Distinction to our friend and former student, Dr. Shana Brown. Shauna is an inspiration to students, faculty, and staff in the Faculty of Engineering and Design at Carleton, not simply because of her exemplary career and her extraordinary personal success, although we're extremely proud of her and her ties to Carleton. It's because she has proven that an individual equipped with an engineering degree can transform our society. The work of a good engineer is very important to us. Every day we depend on infrastructures for our cities, equipment around hospital beds, mobile devices in our pockets, computers and web technologies at our fingertips. But the best engineers, like Shauna, do a lot more than this. They anticipate what our society's needs are and find solutions to our physical and technological challenges before we realize they exist. Google illustrates that idea. Their main product seems simple, actually extremely simple, an efficient, intelligent, and simple web interface that brings the world of web information to our desktop. But behind the scene, Google engineers are enhancing this product to keep up with other web advances. At the same time, they are at work on new ideas and new technologies and new engineering solutions that will make it easier for us to learn, communicate, and work better. The best engineers are one step ahead of us, transforming our world and keeping us moving towards a better society. At Carleton, we try to teach this principle to our students. We encourage them to think creatively, to imagine solutions for the future, and not just solve problems of today. We want Carleton engineering students to become leaders and to change our world for the better, and no one exemplifies this more than Shana Brown. Shauna began her university education here at Carleton University in the field of computer systems engineering, and I had the opportunity to meet Shauna. In fact, the first course I ever taught at Carleton was in January, started in January '87, and Shauna was the best student in that class. In fact, yeah. In fact, given that this was my first course ever, so I remember many actually students in that class, and I'm very happy that many of them are here with us today. So it's good to see you all here. So today, Shauna helps Google find innovative solutions to its most critical, challenging business problem, and she's transforming the way we live, the way we work, and the way we interact with technology. She personifies the excellence we try to encourage in our students, and we are enormously proud to call her a Carleton graduate. Shauna, I'm very pleased to welcome you back in Ottawa, and I congratulate you on your well-deserved award. And now I'd like to call upon Professor David Cull to say a few extra words about Dr. Brown. Professor Cull.
Thank you, Rafiq. I think you've said most of what I wanted to say in a way, but I have a few anecdotes, perhaps. I got to know Shona in classes and so on, but I also supervised her senior project. That's the engineering version of an honors thesis. And it was on video teleconferencing with personal computers. And since then, through various contacts and so on, I followed her career with great interest. And one of the things I wanted to point out today is that very few people can claim to have had a significant effect on the world as we know it. Rafiq discussed the influence of Google itself in our everyday business and family affairs, educational affairs, and so on. But Shauna has changed the way in which business is done in the information age. Her doctoral research presented a business model for firms in the information age that's orthogonal to those that are taught or had been taught in all the best business schools. She realized that the secrets to success were flexibility and innovative process, and that adherence to established business plans, come hell or high water, was the way to oblivion. She's pursued those goals, known sometimes as the Queen of Chaos at Google, managing people and managing projects, and in particular, hiring the people who enabled Google to grow after they went public. And Shona was part of the management team that bought YouTube. And my wife, when we were visiting at our daughter, who's a Carleton graduate who also lives in Silicon Valley, Shona came for dinner. I was going to show you a picture of her. She came from Pajama Day. And she opened the door and went, ta-da! and was wearing a head-to-toe set of pajamas with great big red lips on them. So this is not a unfeeling person. This is a lot of great sense of humor. I've often wondered if, in asking her why they bought YouTube, one of her answers was because it was her own personal feeling that this was the way in which television was going to develop. Since hearing that from her, this is now an accepted fact that television is now driven by users rather than networks. So with that kind of foresight and so on, it's no reason, one of the reasons why Google hires the best people and continues to contribute to the world that we live in. So in all of this, Shona's remained a good friend of the Call family, and especially through our daughter in Silicon Valley, and we wish her all the best in the future.
Thank you. Thank you to David and to Rafik. It's my hope that part of the address this afternoon, Shauna, will include a word on the wardrobe requirements of Google, the dress code at Google. It's now my pleasure to present the 2009 A.D. Dunton Alumni Award of Distinction. Shana Brown has served as Google's Senior Vice President of Business Operations since September of 2003. She's been with Google, following almost a decade consulting with technology clients in Toronto and Los Angeles for McKinsey & Company. In addition to her Bachelor of Computer Systems Engineering degree from Carleton, Dr. Brown also earned a master's degree in economics and philosophy from Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar. She received her PhD and postdoctorate from Stanford University's Department of Industrial Engineering and Engineering Management. Dr. Brown has taught in the Department of Industrial Engineering and Graduate School of Business at Stanford University and within McKinsey's mini MBA program. She's the author of the best-selling business book, Competing on the Edge, Strategy as Structured Chaos, which introduced a new strategic model for competing in volatile markets. She's published broadly in both applied and academic journals. Today, we recognize her as one of Carleton's most distinguished graduates. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to present the 2009 A.D. Dunton Award of Distinction to Dr. Shana Brown.
Thank you very much. So I'm very honored by the award, and I appreciate it. When I was asked if I would accept the award, I said I was honored and I'd be delighted to. They neglected to mention that they wanted me to speak, because I don't do speeches. So what I'd like to do is to spend a few minutes, and I'll talk a little bit about some of my observations, primarily on innovation, and then I'd like to open up the floor to Q&A, which I always find more interesting, and hopefully you'll have questions on topics of interest to you, whatever they may be, and that will be a good conversation. I want to make a couple of comments. So the first is with regards to Rafik's comment. I never knew it was your first class. Your first class? I'm happy to know I did so well in the class, but of course it's because I used Dave McFarlane's notes, who's sitting right here. And you didn't hear him yell, I was number 2 in the class. Dr. Call, who was indeed my supervisor in my senior year, very memorably, because I recall that he was somewhat skeptical about the project when we started, which of course made me more determined to do a decent job so that he would be satisfied at the end. But he also very kindly was a reference on my Rhodes application, to which I'm always grateful for that. I do have to comment on the pajamas. The story is factually accurate. We did have a pajama day at the office, and I guess about Is there a way to pull this higher? Or can I just take it out? Or maybe I'll just pull it out of the, no? Okay, I'll just lean. We had about a third of our employees show up for a pajama day. I have to admit, I think it's the first time that I went to the office in pajamas. Very large, very comfortable flannel pajamas. And when you're going to put flannel pajamas on, you think to yourself, well, what do I wear with flannel pajamas? I mean, how do you accessorize? I decided to wear sneakers. So this is the first time I think I'd been in the office in sneakers and flannel pajamas for the day. And indeed, I was passing over to Barb Call's house that evening. So I showed up in my work clothes. But my observation was it's damn comfortable to go work in flannel pajamas. So I've been advocating for more pajama days at the office. But we don't tend to do anything twice, so is it removed? Yeah, okay, there we go. She's the expert. There we go, that's much better. We don't tend to repeat things, but the pajama conversation also reminded me about a Carleton story. I think it's the most mortifying moment in my entire time at Carleton. We, I think it was in my senior year, but the program was, at least I recall, quite overloaded with the computer science and the electrical engineering requirements. I think they were fine-tuning the program still. So our course load was quite heavy, and we were often there in labs till quite late hours. And I recall finishing a lab, it was probably for your course, Dave. I mean, anyway, we're finishing a lab, wee hours of the morning, 3, 4 in the morning, team project, and I was nominated to hand it in, and it was due at 8:30. So I thought, well, I'll catch a couple of hours sleep. So I went into a conference room and found a conference table and set my little watch alarm and went to sleep, hoping to wake up at 8:30 and hand in my lab that was due, or our lab that was due. I was awakened at 8:45 by, in my recollection, most of the department professors walking in to the conference room for a faculty meeting of some kind. I just remember sitting up, and instead of thinking, this is mortifying to have been sleeping on a table and be awoken by my professors, I remember thinking, damn, my lab is due. I'm late. And running to hand my lab in. So when I think about pajamas, that's the Carleton story that comes to mind. So moving on, I'm going to talk about something I'm quite passionate about, which is innovation, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. Innovation, or applied invention, if you prefer, has always been a topic that's interested me. I always found making new ideas or building new things very exciting. It's probably why I chose to study engineering in the first place, why I studied the management theory behind innovation in my academic work, why I spent time as a strategy consultant helping companies to be innovative and to grow innovative products and services, and ultimately why I joined a small company whose very DNA was about innovation and have helped to try to scale that over the years. But if you ask my mom, who's sitting here and you've all now met, she might describe this interest of mine a little bit differently. She might simply say, Shona is easily bored. Innovation is quite a broad topic, and I think my comments are largely restricted to innovating in a business context, and they reflect some of my observations. So the first point I'd like to make about building an innovative company, and I guess I should say that when I joined Google, there were around 900 employees. We were a fairly small company, just breaching one building, or about to breach one building. We're now about 25,000 employees worldwide. That's over the last 7.5 years. But I don't think you can build an innovative company without great people. It's just, you might as well go home. So that doesn't sound like a very novel idea, but I think to actually do that well, you have to be remarkably obsessive. So I'd like to tell you what I mean by obsessive. So at Google, when we hire somebody, you go through a series of interviews. So every single one of those 25,000 people have been interviewed by anywhere from 4 to 12 Googlers, which is what I call our employees. And there's resumes, and there's background checks, and there's detailed interview notes. And that all goes to a hiring committee. And the hiring committee, because we believe fundamentally that groups make better decisions than individuals, so you'll see that throughout our company. We have very few isolated decisions that aren't made by teams, including hiring. So if you want to get hired at Google, don't talk to me. I can point you in the right direction, but some group is going to make the decision. So they make a decision as to whether to approve the hire, but that's not it. It's not done. Then it comes up to an executive level committee, which is myself and some of my colleagues. And then we actually review the package of information as well, with all the interview notes and the references and so on. And only after we've reviewed it does the offer then get approved for being extended. So every Monday afternoon I spend a couple of hours looking at packets, and I've been doing so for over 7 years. And I think it's this kind of obsession that has allowed us to build a different kind of company. It is a little strange though sometimes, because I walk around the company or I go to new offices. I was just in our Middle East offices this past week, and I meet people and they start talking, and then I'm going, oh yeah, I remember your packet. So that's a little odd, but I do think that this is an obsession, and you don't see it that much in operating companies. It makes a huge difference. So what's a great person? I said we have to hire great people in the context of an innovative company. One principle that we've stuck to is to hire smart generalists. So of course, realistically, you have to hire people with different knowledge and different expertise, but our bias is to look for strong generalist skills. And this is actually quite consistent with the comments that you heard in the introduction. We think that smart generalists are typically very good critical thinkers, and this is one of the key reasons. So people can be born with a stronger critical thinking skill, but it can actually be, a lot of it can be taught. So if I think about my time at Carleton, and no offense, but the details of impulse functions and differential equations is not actually what stuck with me and what I use. And similarly, if I think about my business education, the capital asset pricing model is, woo-hoo-hoo, and, I can talk about unlevered betas, but it's not what I use. What I use is the critical thinking skills. What I use is the ability to approach a problem with a different perspective, and that's what we look for in this kind of smart generalist analytic skills. So how to approach problems with a critical eye. Put it another way, I think that solving the why and how problems are actually much more useful and important for innovation than the what problems. And I like to say that in my view, the world is full of lots of people that are in what ruts. That's just not a very interesting question. It's much harder to find the curious minds who are fascinated by the how and why questions. You kind of got to be obsessive about it, to use that word again. As an aside, this has very little to do with business, but in my nonprofit work that I do, and I'm on a number of nonprofit boards, one of the themes I'm interested in is K through 12 science education, which certainly in the United States is in a rather desperate state. And one of the reasons is that I think you have to nurture this critical thinking at a very early age, and science and math education is one of the best ways to do it. And not just for business, but for society in general. If we have a country full of people who are critical thinkers, we'd all be much better off. Notice I managed to do that without saying anything about law school. Or business school, but anyway. The second point that I'd like to make about innovation is the need for passion. I heard an interesting story on the radio a couple of weeks ago at home, and the observer was a long-time observer of Silicon Valley, and there was a discussion going on about the quality of the entrepreneurs and the new businesses being started. And the observer was making the point that the new entrepreneurs in the Valley were much more incremental, much less inspirational than they had previously been. And his argument was because they lacked passion. He thought that post the booms and busts that we've had over the last few years in the Valley, people were focused on a quick buck. And they were a little bit oriented to building a company that could be quickly flipped and sold, and less about following some revolutionary idea that was really their passion. So I think that the most revolutionary innovation comes from not just folks who are these curious, critical thinkers, but they also have some passion in their belly that they're trying to solve. And with respect to building an innovative company, I think today more than ever that if you want to attract the world's best talent and the world's change agents, you have to have a company that has a mission that people are going to be passionate about. It's just that the generations that we're trying to hire They care about what you're trying to accomplish, and you just won't attract those people unless you have something they can get passionate about. One of my other activities is I've also served for a number of years on the California Roads Selection Committee. And I tell people that after that day of interviewing, it's usually my most optimistic day of the year. The reason I'm very optimistic is you spend this day interviewing these young people, and they're all change agents of innovation, to use your word. They're all critical thinkers. They really are. They wouldn't have made it to the interview stage. But they're also passionate about fighting the world's fight, which is the big criteria in the Rhodes Scholarship. They're smart, they're driven, they're capable young people. But the ones who are the most impressive and have the most impressive accomplishments, and the ones we choose and select to win, they're always brimming with a passion for what they do, whatever element of the world's fight it is that they're working on. The third point that I'd like to make about innovating in the business context is that you have to be able to step back, release constraints, and use your imagination, and really releasing traditional constraints. And that sounds, again, a little bit like motherhood and apple pie. One of my favorite quotes in this area is from Henry Ford, which is to say, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So I don't really believe in close to the customer, you can tell. But one of the strengths at not to insult any particular business books or business frameworks or anything, or try not to, at least. One of the strengths at Google in terms of our product development has been to ignore traditional constraints, and you were alluding to this, Dr. Cole. In our business, our constraints have been CPU power, storage, monetization, it's always good to make money, and bandwidth. Let me give you a few examples. When the founders developed the original search product, there actually wasn't sufficient computational power. In other words, the computers of the day were not actually capable of making that product viable. But they had faith in Moore's law, and they had faith in the computing power was going to increase, so they knew that in the future their product they were developing was going to be viable. That's very unusual to have that sort of vision. As another example, when we launched Gmail, I hope you all use Gmail. Okay, that's a pretty poor showing. All right, for all of you that do, please invite everybody else in the room to... I'm on a mission, okay. So when we launched Gmail, which was on April Fool's Day, 2004, that's a long story, that's another story, that we did not have sufficient storage capacity, nor was it viable given the cost of storage for us to actually provide 1 gig of storage, which was our offering, to all the users that we had at the time, let alone the ones we would have a month later, which was growing exponentially. But we made the offering anyway, again, seeing that the cost of storage would come down dramatically over time. And another example is YouTube, which was mentioned already. The YouTube places or depends on cheap and ubiquitous bandwidth. And today, still today, the costs of that bandwidth, while they're moving to zero over time, there are many places in the world where it's nowhere near that. And so it ultimately will be a viable product everywhere, but even today it isn't. There are many, many examples of products that we've launched without any monetization. In other words, that have no way to make money. But we tend to focus on that, think about creating something useful for consumers and worrying about how to make money from it afterwards. That really does genuinely continue to be the case today. A great example is Google Maps. And I was talking to some of the students earlier, and we had a good discussion about local, which is a terrific opportunity for monetization in maps. The final point I want to make about innovative organizations is the importance of the work environment, very broadly defined. The first thing to say is that it's quite difficult to describe the Google campus. Perhaps for some of the who visited, I would ask you to do it. But the best description that I can give is that it's a graduate school at scale, a very, very well-funded graduate school. The bias is open architecture, so most employees sit in an open office, but when they are in offices, they're 4 to 6 to an office. That might make many of you squirm, but we think that that level of interaction is very positive. Our density, this is not a well-known fact, our density per square foot of employees is about double the typical tech company in Silicon Valley, which is in itself denser than most corporate entities. So we pack them in. But we do try to make life very easy for our employees in terms of managing day-to-day life. So we provide 3 meals a day. We have laundry services. We have gyms. We have massage services. We provide on-site childcare. We have bicycles to get around from one building to the next. And we also have a dog-friendly policy. Unfortunately, for you cat lovers in the audience, this does not extend to cats. In terms of there's always a few. In terms of the management environment, we try to strike a balance of sufficient top-down control to stay focused. That's actually quite difficult and something we've been working on lately. It gets harder the larger you are. And the way I describe it to people is we have an army of lieutenants. So the top-down management is quite difficult. But we really don't want to get in the way of the great people that we've hired. And we truly believe that. Some examples, just to give a few. Peer input is actually the single biggest factor in determining performance ratings and promotion. As another example, we run something called a Bureaucracy Buster on a regular basis. That's good, isn't it, right? I mean, I think so. But everybody needs a little Bureaucracy Buster in their day. But we solicit input from employees. We essentially filter for the best 10 ideas, and that input is all about preventing the creep of bureaucracy. It's inevitable, no matter what organization you are. I think that the scale tipping points are less about absolute numbers and more about the dynamics of the space. For example, when you leave one building, everything is harder. Actually, when you move to 2 floors, everything is harder. But when you leave one building, everything is harder. Facilitating conversations, meetings, all of a sudden you need a lot more work just to make day-to-day happens. Time zones, what a pain in the ass. I really would get rid of time zones. Running a company globally, time zones are really a pain in the ass. But there's these certain critical things that you go through that make all of this more difficult. But the bureaucracy busters try to identify what might not be self-evident, particularly if you're floating up here in the executive layer. You may not see what's happening and causing pain down here lower in the organization. And so what we do is get them to bottom up, identify, and then we take the top 10 on, we tackle them, and we report back to our employees. We have a Friday, thank God it's Friday, TGIF event, fairly common event to have, but what we do in ours is we have executives up on the stage and they're answering tough questions that have been submitted, and there's no ducking. So that's how we give employees yet another forum for expressing their concern. And we have very opinionated employees, which is good, but we hire for it. But sometimes on Fridays we just have beer and pizza and call it a day. So thank you for listening, and I will take any questions now in Q&A. Thank you.
So if you have questions, could you put your hand up? And we have a microphone here and a microphone on the far side, so to make your way to the microphone. And yes, let's start.
Thanks, Jane. Hi, Shauna. My name is Mary O'Keefe, Carleton graduate, and I currently work in Industry Canada. And as you may be aware, the government is doing public consultations right now on the future digital economy strategy for Canada. I invite anyone in the room to participate. Just Google digital economy strategy and you'll find it. And I just wondered what your advice would be to the government on the best role that they can play to support the digital economy.
Ouch. Don't I get to start with an easier question than that? No. You want me to check the second one first? No, that's okay. That's not fair. That's okay. I'm not sure actually what to say. So I have to confess I'm not super familiar with the current state of ICT regulations in Canada and what the challenges are or not, although I'm assuming it's a relatively open market and market economy driven and inspired to let businesses solve the problems. I spend a lot of time, as I'm exec sponsor for the Middle East and Africa for us, and I spend time there. It's less about revenue and much more about market development and trying to catalyze. And in those markets, we're intimately working with governments because fundamentally they are such a large portion of the economy and they control so much of what's possible. I'd like to think that that's less the case here, which isn't to say that the government can't be part of the solution. They can be a huge part of the solution. One of the things that I don't know the state of, but would love to see, is the e-government solutions, the simple things of paying your taxes and all those kinds of things. My personal experience, having been out of Canada so long, is that whenever I do interact, Canada seems to be well ahead of the US in this regard. So I think part of my reason for lack of a quick response is that everything I've been exposed to is that the Canadian government is actually doing a pretty good job. But it has to do with ease of access and often ease of discovery. There's so much about the Canadian government and so many pieces that they play instrumental in people's lives that sometimes I find government entities think, oh, well, we've got it online and it's on a website. What's the problem? It's Google's fault they can't find it. But focusing on discoverability is also, I think, something that sometimes gets overlooked. It's like, we digitize the library. You should be able to find any book you want. But a lot of times people need a lot more hand-holding to do that. So that would be one piece of advice I could give.
Hello, my name is Heimer. I read your book. It's very amazing. In this book, you mentioned 3 changes. The leading.
Oh dear.
It
was a long time ago.
Yeah, leading, anticipating, and reacting. Obviously, I believe Google is leading in a search engine, and Google is anticipating in cloud computing, and reacting in a mobile smart market. My question is, what will Google do to produce the next killer products to maintain its leaders in a search engine? Because in the book you mentioned a band called Grateful Dead, there's a band called Grateful Dead, which give a fresh perspective every time you approach them. There you go. So what is the killer next application that Google proposing?
See, there's a deadhead over there. Okay, sorry. So you're asking us about how we're staying leading in innovation?
What will be the next killer products that Google proposing to maintain a leader in a search engine?
Okay. Well, I'm not going to tell you our secrets, but it's actually a very insightful question, because technology companies, if they are not leading from a technical innovation, it's not a question of nice to have, it's a question of survival. So if you cease to be a leader in innovating in new products and services, then you quickly become irrelevant. It's not that everyone else stops doing it. So it's a very important question. Let me tell you about some of the areas we're very excited about and that we're spending time on without telling you any secrets. Okay. So, and I'll start with one of your examples you mentioned mobile. Right. I'd say about 3.5 years ago, we didn't have much at all going on in mobile. I'm not sure why. It's the first major thing we really missed. Partially probably because we're based in California and, North America is way behind in mobile. So now, fortunately, this many years later, we are much more of an international company, so I feel like we'll less likely to miss some of those things simply because of our geography. But the good news is we said, okay, we really need to do something about this. And for those of you who've been following, we have an open source Android operating system, which is now, I believe, in more phones in the world than any other. Applause.
Yes.
I mean, that's impressive. I'm impressed. So we think that's really important. Obviously, not just it's important for the open source movement. For those of you who follow the software industry, we're pretty excited about that. But so I think the point is just that on mobile, we feel like we caught up and we're leading. Now there are a number of other areas that we're spending time on. We're very focused on the areas of what I would call private information or social information. So when you look for things, you don't want to just look for public information, and you don't want to go somewhere else to look for private information, like somebody's posted some photos or has told you about a funeral that's coming or maybe a birthday party that's coming. In an ideal world, you could simply go and easily look for those at the same time. So when you searched on something, you would get both the personal information and the public information presented to you in a way that makes sense. So that's where the future is going. So you'll see the social aspects, or if you will, the social graph embedded in everything that you do. And that's a important area of focus as an example.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
I was delighted to hear the free and liberal political culture at Google. I'm just wondering, though, to what extent this is bringing Google into conflict with places like China and the Middle East, in which YouTube isn't really accepted, and even Google is hard to get.
Didn't think I'd get through this without someone bringing up China. No. So I think you have to be a couple of things. First of all, if you choose to operate in other countries, you have to respect their laws. The second thing is you have to be culturally humble. What is acceptable in one place is not acceptable in the other. And there are very few examples I can come up with where there's a universal norm. Child pornography is close. Child pornography is pretty much considered child porn wherever you go, but I can almost not think of anything else. So we are a company that thrives on open access to information. Some countries in the world are underwhelmed by that idea, and those present challenging opportunities for us. Somewhere like Saudi Arabia, where I just was, they're actually very excited about technology and its ability to, they need jobs. Their population's about 30 million, and of course we know them as a source of oil. They actually, talk about foresight, you spend time with the government there, and they are worried because oil runs out in 70 years. So they are doing stuff now because they're worried about it, which is quite impressive. But there's a lot of common ground somewhere like that. They definitely have concerns over their definition of pornography. They are used to a more top-down control than you would see in some Western cultures. But there's actually a tremendous, we have so much that we would like to do that's in common. They would like to see homegrown technology companies coming out of Saudi serving both the region and the world. They believe in the information age and the access to information and so on. They believe in education, and with the exception of some of these cultural norms, they're quite open to different ways of doing it. So it's a lot of dialogue. You have to be sensitive, and you have to respect the rules and the way of life of where you are. China's a difficult situation. We have one rule. I think we have really only one rule at Google, and that rule is that China is an exception. So it's very difficult. We would love to bring as many of our services to China as we can. We also have a set of principles that we think are important that we need to stick to globally, and if we can't stick to them, then we choose not to participate. So, for example, YouTube was actually, we never, or Gmail is a better example, we never offered any of our services in China that would require users to sign in. They actually have never been offered. So we entered the market in 2006, but we didn't enter with those products. And that's because we never wanted to be in a position in which the government wanted information about individuals and we were able to give it. So we just never put ourselves in that position. And that's the kind of stuff you have to do.
I think we have time for 2 more questions, all right? If you're okay? Sure. Thanks.
Hey. I just want to say right off the bat that you're kind of like a rock star to me and my friend over there.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. So now that that's out of the way.
You just made me feel 10 years younger.
Well, you should. You clearly have like interesting views on business and the way that things should be approached, which aren't really very conventional to the way that most textbooks and courses are taught. And I was wondering how your background in philosophy and economics and whatnot has kind of influenced you to do that.
Well, I think let me answer and then tell me if I answered the question. I think I understood the question. I started off with a technical education, and that helped me understand the power of technology. But then I thought, to really make a difference in the world, you want to not just understand the technology, but you want to affect the ethical use of that and management of technology. And that's really why I started down a path to economics first and then management of technology, is I just thought, for me, with my interests and skill sets, I mean, listen, I was never the best person at taking apart a radio and putting it together again. I mean, my peers were better. I wasn't always okay, and I worked hard, but I wasn't the best. But taking that and being able to think about the human situation and put the two together, I thought, well, I'm actually pretty good at that. So that's why I pursued that path. I don't know, does that answer your question?
It does.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Great.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. You have 25,000 people that you hired specifically for their creativity and so on. Fantastic, but it does sound like chaos. So how do you actually, I'm really intrigued by how you set up your management infrastructure to handle that. Because if you've got 25,000 people in here with their ideas and their passion and so on, and Google is really good at having these creative ideas come out, but there's 10s of them, 20s of them, 50s of them out of the 25,000 that are there. How do you actually build an infrastructure and management infrastructure to filter those ideas, get them through, eventually get them funded, such that the good ones actually percolate to the top?
It's hard.
I know, and we don't know how to do it, or some people don't know how to do that very well.
I don't have a very short answer for that question, but our problem has always been that we are opportunity rich. And the question is, how do you, precisely that, how do you actually make sure that we do not lack for ideas. The question is, how do you make sure that you surface the ones that are good, add to them, feed them, grow them, build them into little businesses. And I would actually say that we continue to work on this. I mean, I think we could be better. There's a couple of things I can tell you we don't do well that I'm dissatisfied with that are part of the success story. One is we don't shut stuff down. We do have a set of gates in place so that if we don't think much of the idea that you're incredibly passionate about, and you're a wonderful employee, so we want to let you be passionate about it. But what we'll do is that you can't actually get more resources to join you in your effort without going through a gate. So if you want to spend your entire time as an engineer working on something, it's very easy to do. If you want to have your buddy spend time with you, it's relatively easy to do. If you want to go from 2 to a larger team, there's a serious gate to go through. So we're trying to strike this balance between letting the people who think they're a hell of a lot smarter than any of the management team continue to do what they do. Because otherwise you get in the way of these, because you know what, they are smarter. So, but some of them have really stupid ideas. And you try telling them their idea is really stupid, and you can't convince them that the idea is really. So the test, what we use is we use the engineering market test. So if they cannot convince a half a dozen other engineers how brilliant their idea, then it's clearly not that great an idea. So that we try to put some gates in. We never tell people they have to do something. We rarely tell people that they have to do. But we apply the same test to ourselves. So for example, at an engineering all hands, the engineering leaders might stand up and say, these are the most important things that we're working on. This is why we think they're really important. And we would like to divert, new hires, and when people roll off projects, this is what we want to prioritize. And if they do a good job at that, they convince a lot of the community that that's the case, and the problem self-organizes. That's the way we try to solve it.
So for that to work, though, then individual employees must have a little bit of time to actually work on their own project? Oh, yeah,
I should have said, we have something called 20% time.
So I wasn't sure if that was a myth. We've all heard of that, but I wasn't sure if that was a myth or not.
Some employees might say it is, but no, it's real. It's real. Listen, it's hard to say there's a universal rule for every single employee. If you work in our accounting department, I don't know how much 20% time you have. Just being honest. But anyone in a more technical or a more strategic role, so and you can take your 20% time in a different way. The folks who work for me tend to take the 20% time, just the nature of their work. They'll just take a week out and do a whole week on something. There are some cases of people spending time every week working on something, that's less common. In the engineering organization, in fact, a lot of the work I do, which crosses boundaries, I have 20% engineers, meaning it's a 20% project, working on it because they're full-time on something else. And the belief is that it clears the mind. It's a different focus. If you're singularly focused all the time, even if it's deep into some complicated coding work, that this is helpful. So we definitely encourage it. And I'm not sure what percentage of of employees take advantage of it, but in our technical community, you know, some might not do anything for 6 months, and then they'll be deeply involved in a 20% for a few months, and then off and on. But no, it's real.
Thank you, Shona. Unfortunately, I'm sure we could stay all afternoon and learn more, a little peek behind the curtain at life at Google. But I know you all have busy schedules to get back to, and we're deeply appreciative to Dr. Brown for the time that she spent with us today. Thank you very much for your insight and for your discussion of, as I say, life at Google and what you've learned through your time there. That concludes our official presentation, but before we wrap up, I'd like to once again say thank you to our sponsors today, TD Insurance, Meloche Monix, and the Ottawa Business Journal. One more piece of information, one more piece of business before we leave, and that is I have a fabulous gift basket to give away.
Before you do that.
Oh, before I do that.
Say thank you, Shana.
I was getting to that. There we go. And door prize time. So the winner can pick up the prize at the registration desk in the corridor just following the event. The draw has already been made, so the winner is Andrew McRae. Andrew? Andrew, you've won the gift prize. Thank you. Congratulations. Again, thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you to Shona Brown and her family for joining us here today. It's been a wonderful afternoon. Thank you for making these leadership luncheons a success. I hope to see you all back here in the fall for our leadership luncheon then. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.